Good morning, Zimbabwe. Good afternoon, Zimbabwe. Good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to your favorite show, Padare na Chief Oswe. Today, Padare, we have Namatai Kwekweza, a young and very courageous young lady. I think this Dr. Nkomo, when he was speaking, he was referring to young people like this. Remember his famous statement when he said, Zimbabwe will not die. The young people in it will save it. We are seeing one of the saviors right here, Namatai Kwekweza. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take a few minutes to just greet our viewers and listeners. And a lot of people have seen you, they've heard about you, but they don't know who you are. Maybe you can just take some time to just tell us a few words about you and give us your inspiration. Where do you get the inspiration to do all these things that you do?
All right, so thank you very much, Chief. Yes, hello everyone. My name is Namatai Kwekweza, and I'm based here in Zimbabwe. I'm 22 years old. I'm a law student with the University of South Africa. I've also studied a diploma in diplomacy and international relations. I'm very passionate about policy. I'm very passionate about young people, and I'm very passionate about debate, particularly in the context of debating legislation and also being able to contribute and add my voice in spaces where it matters the most. With regards to where I draw my passion and my inspiration from, basically, I think like any other ordinary Zimbabwean, I've had my fair share of difficulty. And the question for me has always been, why is it that some people will continuously struggle in this country at the expense of the decisions that are being made by a few individuals who make it difficult for everyone? So I personally developed a very strong passion for policy and a very strong passion at my voice in spaces where it matters most because of my personal experiences as a young person, and also realizing that I could actually speak out and be heard and also contribute towards shaping the narrative of what I would want my country to be like, particularly for the young people and just in general for everyone. So it's just basically from my experiences, the hardship that I have experienced, the hardship that I see around. That is why I draw my inspiration to actually want to participate. So I think in a nutshell, that would be me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think some people now know who you are. But let's move on now and talk about the Constitutional Amendment Bill. We have heard a lot about it. We have seen you make noise about it. But I can tell you, I can assure you, a lot of people here that are listening right now don't understand what this animal is all about. That is called Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. Indulge us, teach us, just educate us about it and what is its impact.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for the question. It's very true that a lot of people are not aware of Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. And it's very unfortunate that the Constitution is being amended while the bulk of citizens, the bulk of Zimbabweans, are not cognizant or aware that such a process is actually happening as we speak right now. So I'm just going to start by giving a shout out to a few organizations that have been very instrumental in terms of making sure that this information is made available to anybody, and especially people like me that are very interested in policy debate, etc. So there's Veritas, there's Kubatana, there is Parliament of Zimbabwe, there is News Hawks, there's Zimbabweans for Human Rights, there's We Lead organization that I work for, and then there's also MISA Zimbabwe. So all of these organizations have informed some of the stuff that I'm going to share. Of course, there are a lot of other organizations that I draw so much information about some of these things from organizations like Heal Zimbabwe, organizations like Crisis Coalition. They always have something good to share about all these things. So they formulate great sources that people can follow, even as I speak right now on social media, because they're always giving constant updates about some of these processes. And whenever something new pops up, they will always keep you informed. So I actually encourage people to follow some of these institutions that I've stated. Right. So let's just dive into the issue of the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. So on the 17th of January 2020, the Speaker of Parliament of Zimbabwe gazetted the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. Why is it Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2? It's because in 2017, there was Constitutional Amendment Bill number 1, which basically was focusing on the judiciary. But this one, again, was strongly attacked by people, and it never went through. So that was how it died its natural death, Constitutional Amendment Bill number 1. So then in late 2019, Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 was proposed. And this one was a very comprehensive and more detailed attempt to amend the Constitution. And it is still looming, it is still pending. At the moment, I'm currently informed it's in its second reading. That's the stage where we are at. So I'm going to explain a little bit about that later on. But that's the story of how we have Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. So basically, we need just to understand what is an amendment, right? So think of it as like you've got a piece of clothing that's probably torn somewhere, or maybe there's a weakness somewhere, or maybe you just don't like what it looks like, so you decide to rip some part of it, and then you put a different piece of clothing to cover up that weak area or that place where you rip. So it's just basically the same concept of an amendment. You've got the Constitution, which is that whole piece of clothing, and these amendments are speaking to areas that are going to be either ripped out or added. So that's the aspect of deleting some aspects of the Constitution or adding some aspects of the Constitution. So that is what an amendment basically is. And this is going to be happening in certain sections of the Constitution, but I'm going to later on discuss. So one of the biggest questions a lot of people have asked about Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 is, why aren't they having a referendum for them to amend the Constitution? And the reason why they're not having a referendum, basically whereby people vote on it, is because you're only required by the Constitution to have a referendum when you are attempting to amend something in the Bill of Rights. All right. So if it's an amendment out of the Bill of Rights, there is no need for a referendum. The Constitution does not mandate you to have a referendum for you to amend something that's outside the Bill of Rights. So that's why legally there hasn't been that route to have a referendum. So those are some of the key things that people have to understand. So now let's get back into the history of this amendment. So we say that in late 2019, Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 is introduced. And then on the 17th of January 2020, the Speaker of Parliament gazetted the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 in Parliament. And then, so as such, April 17, 2020 was the earliest date on which the Constitutional Amendment Bill was supposed to be tabled in Parliament for its first reading. But as it were, this was overtaken by events because we had COVID-19, so that delayed the process. All right. So because on the 30th of March in 2020, a lockdown was announced by the president with regards to the global health crisis and pandemic. So this is now a broader conversation into understanding that in 2013, we realized that 3.3 million Zimbabweans participated in the formulation of the Constitution, with 94.4% of people voting yes in the referendum to the 2013 Constitution. Now, after 94.4% of participants affirmed the process in 2013, we fast-tracked that to 2020, whereby the Constitution is being amended through Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. And we realized that this process is being done during a global health pandemic. It's being done during an imminent lockdown. It's being done where generally, overall, citizens are incapacitated to participate because they are pretty much concentrating on such issues as their livelihoods. They're not concentrating on anything to do with policy. They're not concentrating on anything to do with constitutional amendments. So citizens are basically focusing on how do we survive? Do we have enough to eat? But then the government is attempting to amend the constitution, a constitution which was endorsed by 3.3 million Zimbabweans. And yet during the lockdown, people are naturally excluded from participating in the process. Now, the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 was not publicized or popularized the same way the 2018 constitution making process was publicized and was put out there. This process was very exclusionary. It was littered with too many shadows, and a great amount of people up to this date have no idea that such a process was instigated and is taking place. And yet we understand that the amendments that are going to be put in this constitution are going to be used to govern each and every one of us, regardless of were you aware or were you not aware that these amendments were made, but you should be governed under these amendments. So with Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2, what we need to factor is that there are basically two aspects. So we've got the contents of the Amendment Bill number 2, and we've got the procedure through which this amendment bill has been fast-tracked. So the contents, I'm going to touch on a few of the contents of this particular bill, so that people understand what are the implications, what does it mean if some of these amendments go through. So I will first start with the Section 327 of the Constitution, which seeks to be amended. And this one basically speaks into international conventions and agreements, whereby it limits the powers of Parliament to approve international treaties, and therefore it reduces Parliament power to veto treaties. So what it basically means is that in the event that maybe the executive arm of government wants to enter the country in contractual agreements that have fiscal implications that probably are going to lead us into debt, and it's going to be the taxpayer who eventually services that. They will have limited interference or oversight from Parliament because powers are going to be emphasized on the executive. The executive is going to get more power from this. So that's the amendment on Section 327, which could be used by the executive to advance whatever it wants in terms of getting the country into different agreements. And this will be done with as minimum consultation from Parliament, as well as minimum interference from Parliament, and basically empowering the executive, which already has a lot of power bloated it is in its faculty. Then we also have Section 92, which speaks into the election of president and vice president. This is one of the biggest hot potatoes in the constitutional amendment bill number 2. And basically, this one seeks to it seeks basically to increase presidential powers. And then it basically implies that a political party would be able to elect president in the event of his death. So how this would work is that it basically goes back to the 2013 Constitution, in which what was deliberated and decided was that in 2023, the person who got the second most amount of votes would be vice president. So the amendment of this means that by the time that we get to 2023, the person who has the next most amount of votes will not be allowed to be vice president. Yet this was what was agreed about in 2018 Constitution. So the idea around this now implies that because the vice president now is no longer elected, but rather is appointed by the sitting president, in the event that a president dies or a president is incapacitated to perform their responsibilities, the vice president, who is basically appointed by a political party through the sitting president, will be the one who takes over. And basically, this provision takes away the power of the electorate, because we will not have a say on who is to lead us, especially in times like that. Another one that is being amended, that is an issue of concern, is the clause around the judges, which is basically in Section 180. So it's just the promotion and tenure of judges. So the proposed section expands the power of the president. So basically what it does, it means that initially the provisions, that judges were supposed to retire at 70. But now senior judges, Supreme Court, Constitutional Court, will be allowed to continue to work until age 75, subject to the goodwill of the president and favorable to a medical report. And also public interviews for judges are going to be removed. And these were an avenue and an opportunity for the public to equate sentiments towards people who were going to be judges. So what basically this does again is that it emphasizes powers in the executive. And it means that in the event that there is a dispute, between maybe political actors, maybe due to an election result that has been produced, you're going to have to go to judges that basically owe their existence to the president, the sitting president, who is also an interested party in the process. But these judges are going to be compromised because there is too much power in the executive over the judges, and therefore it tempers with the balance of power that is supposed to exist between the judiciary, the executive, as well as the legislative arm of government. So these are some of the key issues of concern I personally have seen. And it's important for people to understand that with Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2, there were initially 27 proposed amendments. And of these 27 proposed amendments, there are about 5 to 7 of them which are actually a big deal. And which the government is pursuing ferociously. Just to mention a few other sections that seek to be amended, there is Section 124 on the composition of National Assembly, which is basically seeking to extend the provision of the party list members of National Assembly, as well as to have a special arrangement for 10 extra seats for youth. There is also one on women, extending the women quota, which has left the women's movement severely polarized, with the bulk of women echoing that they do not want a quota system. So we'll see how that goes. There's also issues around delimitation, and from some of the things that I've heard, some of these issues have already been stripped out by the Minister of Justice, as they hope to lesser of the proposed amendments, and I'm yet to actually find out which ones have been stripped out and which ones are going to go forward. So we also understand that these are some of the issues that are happening with Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 in the context of the contents of Amendment Bill number 2. So particularly with the issue of youth, we have to understand that young people constitute the majority of our population. About 77.9%, according to the stats, young people under the age of 30. And when you read statistics that have been produced by UNFPA in Zimbabwe, they stated that round about 64% of young people in this country are actually under the age of 25. So we understand that we've got a huge demographic of people who are very young, and for them to be offered 10 seats for representation in a quota system is a form of mockery to some extent. And this has been the general sentiment and echoing amongst the youth movement. So that having been said, I just want to quickly dive into the procedural aspects that also raised concern before I then sum everything up in the context of understanding why there has been so much uproar. Like, why are people so angry and why there has been so much backlash? Because we need to understand that beyond the legal aspects, there is also the political connotation to this amendment. The fact that it has been forwarded by the executive, which is a ZANU-PF executive, they also have their own interest and they're also advancing some type of agenda. So we also need to analyze all of that and be in a position where we try to extract some kind of meaning as well as to inform our way forward, because it's now being informed not just from the legal perspective, but also from the political connotations that are there with Amendment Bill number 2. So what we need to understand is that, yes, we had said that in 2013, 3.3 million people participated. We have not seen a significant number of people participating in Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. We have not seen it being popularized the same way the constitution making process was popularized in 2013. We also have to take cognizance, these are now the procedural aspects, that this amendment bill was proposed in a lockdown in which people's movement was restricted, their participation was limited. Because even at the time of the public hearings, we would understand that some people were actually turned away at roadblocks. Some people were unable to freely move and get to the public hearing centers where they would actually contribute and have their voices being heard. We also understand that even in Harare, the idea was to have a physical meeting, but this was cancelled and a Zoom meeting was held, a Zoom meeting which I personally attended, and there was nothing productive and nothing fruitful that was actually done in that Zoom meeting. I remember people were actually typing obscenities in the chat box in that Zoom meeting. And a meeting which was supposed to have started like an hour earlier started an hour late, and there was no extension of time to compensate for like the time that was lost when nothing was happening except people cursing each other in a chat box. So you'd realize that it's not just the issue in the context of the public hearings and how accessible or inaccessible the venues were. It's also that aspect of people were genuinely restricted from moving around, and also the public hearing in Harare that was then made into a Zoom public meeting left out a lot of people because some people do not have data, some people were still learning how to use the Zoom application. So it was extremely difficult for people to actually participate, and some people didn't even know that there was such a public hearing. And these were some of the concerns that we raised to say, you know what, the gravity of this matter means that we can't have shady, shoddy meetings where people, some people have physical meetings, some people have online meetings, and there is no justification as to why the other people got an online meeting and why the other people had physical meeting, and there's no justification to say, were you cognizant of the uptake of people to online meetings, because this was a time when there was starting. So these were some of the concerns that we raised, and we have actually pointed them out to the Minister of Justice. Then after the public hearings were held, one of the things that then happened was that the Parliament produced, this is a report that was produced by the Portfolio Committee on Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, whereby they said that the majority of people who participated in the public hearings said no. They actually were against the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. But they said they were going to still go ahead with this amendment process because according to them, these people were coached or these people were sponsored to go against this amendment bill number 2. And I remember when we had a conversation with the Minister of Justice, we asked him if they could substantiate the claim that these people were sponsored. And as of late, they have not substantiated that particular claim that these people were sponsored. And our other question was that if indeed you think that these people were sponsored, is the remedy to just then say we are going to just ignore all of them and just proceed? What would be the remedy? Would it not be fair to redo the process? Would it not be fair to find other methods rather than just ignoring the voices? Because at the moment they have no evidence that these people were sponsored, and yet they said, well, we are going to overlook those voices because according to them these voices were sponsored, and they cannot substantiate that claim. So these are some of the queries that have been raised, and to date, this is a challenge that is always there, particularly the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, to say, can they substantiate the numbers of people who are for this particular bill? Can they substantiate those numbers? Because even when they did the public hearing, I can personally argue that they did not consult more than 2,000 people across the country. Because typically, in a particular public hearing, you understand that there will be about maybe 50, about 200 people. And since they went to about 10 provinces around the country, they could have never really passed 2,000 people. In addition to that, when the report that was produced by the Ministry of Justice, the Portfolio Committee of Justice, came out, we also understand that it was not a report that provided us with enough sufficient detail as to the numbers of people who participated in the public hearings, as to details around the agenda, as to details around their aids, as to all of that comprehensive details, to then see, like, overally in that process, how many Zimbabweans actually participated. So one of the greatest questions that we have been asking is to then say, why are you in such a rush to amend the Constitution when we understand fully well that we are in the midst of a global health crisis to which Zimbabwe was poorly prepared for? Why are you amending the Constitution? Because people are not always going to be able to participate meaningfully and effectively. All right. So I'm just going to dive through the 10 key major points to which we have argued that the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 should not be something that is pursued because it's really not going to benefit Zimbabweans, but it's going to be benefiting the executive, particularly the office of the president. And it's just basically another effort to consolidate power and to continuously bloat the powers of the executive. So like I said, the first reason has to be that the majority of participants in the public hearings expressed that they did not want this amendment bill number 2, and yet their voices have been ignored, and this bill is pursued. We also understand that amending the Constitution at the moment is not a priority, as the majority of Zimbabweans are not aware of the Constitution. There was a research that was done by the Youth Empowerment and Transformation Trust, in which it stated that the majority of young people, basically 1 in 5 young people in Zimbabwe, are aware of the Constitution. That is about maybe 15 to 70% of the overall population of young people in the country who are aware of the Constitution. So instead of amending the Constitution, why don't you educate people first? Then the other issue is on implementation. The Constitution has not been fully implemented. So if you've not fully implemented it, why would you want to amend it? Because some of the things have not been actually tested to see if they work. So you want to amend something and remove it when we have not actually tried it out to see if it works. Because the premise of an amendment would be to say, oh, well, maybe we tried this out, but it didn't really work. So now let's remove it and try it in a different way. So why not implement the Constitution first before we actually start making amendments to the Constitution? The next reason would be on the alignment of laws. There is a need for us to align the existing laws with the 2030 Constitution, which is something that has not been done. It's absolutely ludicrous for us to want to amend the Constitution when most of the laws have not already been aligned to that Constitution. So priority should actually be, let's first align laws to the Constitution instead of like rushing to amend the Constitution, because that in itself makes more logical sense in terms of the chronology of things, how things should actually be done properly. The next reason is the COVID-19 health crisis, the lockdown, And we know that there are livelihood issues which limit the participation of citizens in the process. This process must not be done with exclusionary tactics, whereby citizens are too disempowered to participate in this process meaningfully, effectively in their millions. It is absolutely ridiculous for us to say a constitution that was put in place through the contributions of 3.3 million Zimbabweans is going to be amended by a very small population, a very special political elite class of individuals, probably less than 100, who are going to sit down and say, we don't like this, we don't like that, we're going to add this, we're going to add that, without the consent of the general public. People have to know, and people have to participate in their millions in this process. We cannot just amend a constitution that will one day come to govern all of us. Contents are going to affect all of us every day of our lives without us knowing what is being deleted or what is being added in that constitution. Another issue that has been raised is that the constitutional amendment bill number 2 in itself is just a political instrument that is meant to consolidate power for the office of the president. And this is the political discourse that a lot of people are trying to gravitate away from. But I think it's a political discourse that we need to have. We need to understand that in 2020 alone, during the global health crisis and pandemic, a lot of draconian pieces of legislation were actually introduced, or they are intended to be introduced, and the conversations started being held in 2020. One of them is, like we say, the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2, which is being pursued. We also understand that the Patriot Bill was mentioned, and we also understand that other pieces of legislation around cybersecurity and data protection were also mentioned. And all of these are very crucial pieces of legislation which are being forwarded at a time when the citizens of this country cannot meaningfully and effectively participate in these processes. And we must understand that it is typical of governments that when they get into power, they're going to naturally try to change the rules of the game to favor them. They're going to naturally try to consolidate power through sometimes going through the policy route, going through the legal route, and making sure that the laws are in their favor, making sure that they have enough power to do what they will or what they wish. So we need to be in a very strong position where we understand, but that apart from the legal connotation of Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2, there's also that political connotation to say that there are people who are very interested in power, and they are using the amendments to the Constitution to be able to accumulate power for themselves and to consolidate power for themselves. And I would safely tell you that in our interface with the Minister of Justice, he clearly stated that the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 originated from the executive arm of government, particularly that of the president, and which is why it seemed like most of the proposed amendments have a strong bias to giving more power to the office of the president and giving more power to the executive, because they emanated from the executive. One of the questions that we then had to ask was there prior consultation by the executive before they proposed amendment bill number 2? Did they consult the public? And as it appears, they might have had conversations about in their own political party, but they did not consult the broader citizenry on whether or not they wanted some of the provisions that they were proposing be put in Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. So yes, this is an executive-motivated, executive-inspired bill, and it's actually meant to benefit the executive arm of government through adding more power to it, through assisting it to consolidate power. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the ordinary citizen, and very little in the way of benefiting ordinary people like you and me. So I think I will end it at that with regard
Okay, right on time, Namatai, because there's someone who is just joined that who wants to ask a question here. Simba Chikanza is just joined, and he wants to pose a few questions. Simba, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Namatai, brilliant presentation, as always. And I'm sure the people of Zimbabwe are listening to you. I must say I'm impressed by the dedication that you have been wielding and are still taking up on your shoulders to challenge the institutional corruption that has destroyed our country. I'm also encouraged, I must say, to see a young person who is doing what many olders old people are doing, but are failing to do. But quickly, Namatai, I want to ask you, how much are you doing yourself to connect with the older generation? Because there are other individuals who've gone before you. There are some in their 80s and their 90s who've been doing the same thing that you're doing, some successfully, some failing. I'm just trying to see here, do you know what you're doing is absolutely amazing, but how well coordinated are you now with the older generation of alike minds?
You can go ahead, Namatai. Unmute yourself and go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, that's a particularly excellent question. So from the experiences that I've personally had, and also like some of the young people that I interact with and that have been active in this process, we have received a lot of like support, be it moral support, from individuals who are much older, probably a little bit more now out of the space, who have basically been there to give us encouragement. And the sentiment with most of these older people is that they refuse to be at the forefront or influence how we work, because the belief and the notion and the trust is in the knowledge that we as young people must actually.
Wow. Our network.
Yeah, the network is dragging.
The Zimbabwe network.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Yeah, you can even get closer to your device. That would be great.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's wonderful. So basically, these individuals have made it very clear that they don't want to be the forefront or influencing us in the context of like how we approach most of these issues, upon the premise that we as young people must be able to understand our own issues and must be able to run with them and forward them, with as minimum interference from what they went through. So the stories have been shared, the support has been given by a lot of individuals that I've interacted with, whom I will not mention, and who I have the consent to mention them, but they have been supporting what we're doing, just basically moral support, and just saying that it's okay for young people to actually be leading some of these processes and this debate. And I think that I respect that particular position the most, because one of the things that the state will often say is that these young people can't think for themselves. They are obviously being sent to do this by someone. They are being sponsored to do this by someone. And to be honest with you, this is a very redundant narrative. It's a very old narrative that absolutely has no water. I can safely tell you that when we started doing these processes around the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2, it was out of passion. No one sponsored us. When we went to see the minister, we just went there. Even when we were arrested, police who arrested us for our protest were actually laughing at our placards to say like, "Oh, your placards look so ugly," because it was just basically Manila and ink, that like mighty markers that we used, that came literally out of my own personal my own personal coffers of stationery home. So it's one of those things where yes, there is a good relationship with like-minded old people, and they have given their moral support, they've given their blessing, they support us in ways that they can, but they have made it very evident that they would not want to interfere with the work that we are doing, because they would not want to create a situation whereby people will say, "Oh, these kids are being sent by so and so who has this and that agenda to do what they're doing." And I think that it's high time that Zimbabweans appreciate that there are a lot of brilliant, amazing young people in this country, some even more brilliant than myself, probably not given as much exposure, not given as much audience, but they are there. I have seen them, I know them, I have met them, and they do not need anyone to answer them or tell them that you need to do things this way. They understand issues and they are ready to be on the go, in particular reference advocating around these issues and display activism around these issues, because they are also capable of understanding and being passionate. So that has been the relationship with all the like-minded people. And before you came in, Simba, initially when I started my presentation, I hinted that there are a lot of other institutions who provide the sufficient information to the publications. They might not send you to say, go do this, but they are always at the forefront of making sure that we have access to some of the information that is actually happening, even behind closed doors. And some of these organizations, like I had hinted before you came in, include such organizations as Kubatana, include Veritas, include even the parliament itself. Great source of information. You take the Hansards, you read the debates, you think for yourself, what does this mean? What is the legal interpretation of all of this? What does it mean for young people? What does it mean for the future of this country? So they have been great resources that are also institutional, of individuals who are given non-partisan interpretation of what is happening. And then we as the young people are left to think for ourselves if we want that and if it's good for the democratic discourse of our country. So I think that's how I would respond to that for now. Thanks, Simba.
All right. Thank you very much, Namatai. Before I go back to Simba, let's just get some feedback from our viewers around the world here. Ed Monya Tondo is saying no to this patriotic nonsense. Ernest Vurai, if we can have more of your type, my sister, our country will be a better place to live. Ivan Rufasi Anzi Handei Nayo Toida Iyo. Jesse Semwa keep same eyes. Keep fire burning, my darling. Sidin Kanyemba Dibatsireo Chi Chinonzi patriotic bill. Being honest, guys. Don't worry about that, Sydney. We are going into that segment, so don't go away. Namatai still has to explain and talk about the patriotic bill. No to the patriot bill. Sydney Kanyemba, ignorance. Emmanuel Nyakonda, hashtag no to patriot bill. Ignorance is bliss. Martha is saying, I love this girl. Keep it up. So many comments coming up. If you have any questions to Namatai, please just type them on the comment section and I will be able to read them. Simba, do you still have another question or comment?
Yes, quickly. And are you connecting, Namatai, also? I mentioned the older generation, but I also throw here this other one. Are you connecting with media facilities, media personalities, for instance, but also other players? I'm talking about, however, still within the media space, with the agenda of having results. I mean, it's great to have your campaign. It's amazing. It's absolutely impressive. It is clear. But how realistic are we? How realistic are you yourself in getting results? And how could we put a finger and say, look, all right, Namatai, you're plugging in that. After 2 months, this is where we'll be. So the question there, I know I might have thrown in so many things, so many statements, but the major one here, what about media resources? How about yourself also getting involved in this type of, because I'm thinking you can see in other countries, the major driver to the type of change that you would like to see, the type of push that you are trying to achieve is the media. Look at the US, is the media that managed to stop Donald Trump. So that's the question there. I'm hoping that it is clear.
You can go ahead, Namatai, briefly, because people are waiting for the Patriot Bill. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks very much for the question, Simba. So one of the things that I would like to highlight is that there are a lot of other institutions, a lot of other organizations from the media, from the civil society, who have been up and about the Patriot Bill and the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. There are so many of them, and we plug into their resources all the time. Some of the organizations I've already mentioned them here. They publish excellent things that people can actually digest in. I think a particular newspaper that I find very intriguing is News Hogs. They're always publishing information that I think is very relevant and it's very important. So in terms of are you Namatai plugging in? I think the question would be, is also the media plugging in? Because from our context, the idea of building a movement is to explain and articulate our issues so well that a journalist sitting in their office will find it relevant to publish a particular article or to publish a particular opinion piece around the work that we are doing. I think particularly with News Hogs, they have done exceptionally well. Today in the afternoon, I was reading an article that was written by a gentleman of the name Tichawona T. Denere. And we never told him to write about the Patriot Bill, but he wrote about it so excellently. And the amount of scholarly input that he put in there was exceptional. So that has always been the case, and particularly in the context of how I've understood things. People must not feel that, oh, this thing is being done by them, so then let them do it. This is a broader conversation that every responsible institution, be it from the media, be it from civil society organizations, must in their personal capacity take up and be able to research, develop positions, and also put those positions out there, publish those positions, organize meetings. And I know a lot of institutions that are already doing that. I know a lot of media houses that are already doing that. And that for me has been an excellent experience, especially particularly with the Patriot Bill. I've seen that happen. I know a lot of academics, a lot of scholarly input, because it's not media, it's also academics, it's also different groups that I know that are actually organizing, around this. So that has been the experience for me. And like I always say, there is no monopoly over an issue. Any group can participate, any group can add its voice, because it's important for us to decentralize these issues and not have them centered around civil society organizations or individual activists. People have to know that even if I was like arrested for a year and no one heard me speak or heard me speak for a very long time, someone out there would always be driving this and pushing it because they personally feel compelled to be able to voice out and to participate in these processes. And that's the importance of movement building. So I have always told people that our duty, especially activists, people like myself, is to always make sure that we inspire and we educate. And then people take this up and they run with it. The responsibilities of different organizations to disseminate information is to disseminate information so that people like myself can understand and then we campaign. So this has been the approach that we've taken. Be very, very liberal. Of course, there's a lot of organizing happening, which I would not be appropriate for me to share on a platform like this. But definitely there is a lot of organizing, trying to reach out to different players, different people, different groups, and to also have them buy into the process. But we have tried to make sure that we liberalize it and there's a movement sentiment so that even people in a different part of the country, if they decide to organize around this, they don't need to first call me, they don't need to first call civil society organizations. If they understand it, however they understand it, they should run with it and they should make sure that in their own context and in their own understanding, their voice around the Constitution Amendment Bill and the Patriot Bill is heard. Because at the end of the day, what is happening has absolutely nothing to do with me or a few organizations or a few personalities and a few individuals. It has everything to do with everyone who is a Zimbabwean. And once we understand this, that is what will separate us from the people who are trying to amend the Constitution after consulting an elite class of politicians who don't constitute a majority in this country. So we have to be very liberal in our approach and allow others to understand what is happening and also run with it in their own context. That is how movements are built.
Yes. Thank you very much, Namatai, for that. I think we're going to allow Namatai to, take a glass of water and take a short break. But don't go away because we're going to play a short video clip here where Namatai gave a very, very powerful speech. And then we'll talk about that in a short while. So, Namatai, please take a break. Just a short break. Let's play this video.
My name is Namatai Kwekweza. I'm 20 years old, I'm a young woman, and today I'm representing We Lead, which is a youth leadership development organization. We as young people are the hardest hit by everything that is happening. If you look at the people who've been hardest hit by the violence, the people are getting abducted, beaten up, the people are getting arrested. We've had reports of young people as young as 6 years old, as young as 11 years old, being taken and beaten up. We have to talk about these things because they are affecting young people. Now, please do bear with me here. I do not believe in the politics of generationalism. I believe in intergenerational dialogue. I believe that the young people and the old people should come together and talk in full consensus, but let us tell the truth. Because the truth is the only thing that will set us free. It might make us uncomfortable. It might make us a bit hesitant, but it is the only thing that can bring healing, and it is the only thing that can set us free as a nation. We must learn to realize that there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that makes us different. We are people. We're just people. We are just people. Be able to look at the next person and see a person. Let us not look at another person and see a white Zimbabwean. Let us see a Zimbabwean. Let us not look at another person and see MDC or ZANU-PF. Let us see a Zimbabwean. Let us not look at another person and see, oh, this church and that church. Let us see a Zimbabwean. We are all people. And the moment that we come to this realization, it means that we are ready and for peace, and we are ready to talk about things in objective fashion that are leading us into a future of prosperity. But as long as we are coming together and we are not telling each other the truth, then we have a problem. And the fact of the matter is that we have come here sometimes sort of filtered and sort of censored. We've been told, oh, talk about this, don't talk about that. When you mention the sensitive part, say these are allegations. But I want to talk firstly about rape. I am a young woman, and I believe that we have to speak against such things, because these things will not bring peace in the long run. Whether these women are coming forward and they're talking about it as allegations, these are young women. Most of the people who've been affected are young women, and as a young person, I can only stand to say that we have to talk about it in an objective fashion. And we cannot have a dialogue such as this one and leave and not have talked about this. That's the first.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You were on fire there. We are people. We are all people. We are just people. That's what I now refer this famous speech as, the We Are People speech. What was the inspiration? And you also talked about the organization We Lead. Maybe you can just get us into that as briefly as you can. Yes, you can unmute Namatai and go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. You can hear me now. Great. Awesome.
We can, yeah.
Oh, yes. So that's absolutely fine. So the organization called Lead is an organization, a youth leadership development and advocacy organization that I founded when I was 18. And the story relating to how I ended up founding this organization is related to some, like I said, personal experiences that I experienced as a young Zimbabwean. I can tell you that I finished high school when I was 17. And after I finished high school, after I was 17, my parent, my mom, had been retrenched from work after that declaration in 2015, whereby people could be laid off their jobs with only 3 months' notice. So it was a time where I realized that because my parent was a single parent, I wasn't going to go to university, even though I had the grades that qualified me even into law school. But I knew I wasn't going to go to school. And I can tell you that I spent a span of about 3 years before I went to school. And it is the things that I did within those 3 years that brought me to where I am today. Some of the experiences, hardship that we went through, motivated me to be in a position where I say to myself, if someone can make a decision that can potentially ruin people's lives, the way that decision to lay people off with 3 months notice ruined our family. Imagine thousands of families that were ruined by that decision. But we have a fighting spirit. We have the resilience. And in my case, the resilience paid off because I ended up on the extreme end of wanting to be involved and to be engaged, to participate in issues and processes. But for some other young people, it was the end. Some probably were so affected, they became alcoholics, they became drug addicts. And this is actually a serious issue in our country, the conversation around mental health and substance abuse among youth. Because we understand that about 50% of young people in Zimbabwe are hooked with some kind of narcotic or drug. So this speaks into a generation with mental health issues, and they emanate from some of the experiences we have. But I think in retrospect, one of the things that happened before I founded the organization was to always be consistently asking the conversation around the powerful and the powerless. To always be in a position where you children raised by single parents, people who are just trying to make a living, people just trying to go to school, just be good citizens. You know, what can we do to ensure that we have a voice in those conversations where powerful men and powerful women decide our future for us? They practically have the machinery to ruin our lives if they decide. How can we be involved in that conversation? And this has generated my passion for policy, my inspiration to work with young people to tell them that you cannot be victims. You've got to lead. Whatever situation you're facing, you've got to lead. You can't be, saying, "Oh, someone is going to come help us." We have to take the initiative. There is no hero that is going to come. There is no one from any other country that's going to save us. It is us who can do the most to save us. So we lead as a youth leadership development and advocacy institution. And it's just basically about developing youth leadership so that young people are able to participate in continental processes and international processes. And then the other part of your question was the inspiration behind the famous speech. So I can safely tell you that what happened for me to even be giving that speech was purely a coincidence. So I went to this network the day before I went to give that speech. And the organizers of that particular conference, which is Zimbabwe Constitutional, called one of the persons I had gone to see at that network, at that youth network. And they just said, well, we need it for tomorrow. They have to be young and a woman. And I was literally sitting in front of the person. They said, yeah, I think I've got someone, they'll come. Wow. And I wasn't really told about the nature of the speech. I was so busy trying to make sure everything fitted. So I think that also was very good because no one censored me. No one pushed me to say this or don't say that. I just said what I thought. And I think that one of the things that happened on that day was that when I got to the place and people were giving presentations, we understood that that dialogue was about the people who had been affected by the abductions and the horrible things that had happened, the rapes, all of those things, the crackdown that had happened in January of 2019. We understood that that was why we were there for that dialogue. But no one had explicitly said that we were there for that. And that for me was rather shocking to say, like, if I was a victim and people are saying they're having a dialogue about what happened to us, but they're not saying what happened to us, it makes it very complicated. I think people mostly spoke about, let's forgive, or let's move on, let's do this, but no one was explicitly saying what happened. So by the time that I got on stage, I was very furious because I could ask myself, like, why hasn't anyone said anything? So I think it was just a moment of childish naivety, to say the least, and unfuted anger, because I just couldn't understand why we could be having a dialogue about some of the worst experiences that had happened to our fellow countrymen and countrywomen and citizens. And, people were not talking about what had actually happened. They were just talking about how we should strive to move on and to forgive, and which is all good. But we also need to talk explicitly and openly about the experiences of fellow countrymen and countrywomen, particularly when people have been abducted, when people have been abused, when people have been beaten up. They cannot be healing and moving on when the processes around healing are littered with shadows and people are not being open and people are not saying what exactly happened. And that is a culture that we have to cultivate. a culture of truth telling, a culture of being able to say, well, this happened, and we don't like it, we don't want it to be a part of us. A culture that I've seen happening in countries like Rwanda, where there was a genocide. We're not going to deny that it was there. The bones are there. This is where people were killed. Their clothes are there. We see it. And from there, we can start having the
Yeah, this network. Oh my goodness.
around healing and forgiveness. I think that.
Yeah, it looks like we're having network problems, challenges here. Well, that was Namatai speaking about the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. She will come back. We'll just while up the time as she comes back. I know she's definitely going to try and log back in. Whilst we're doing that, let's go to our comments here. And thank you, Namatai, for a powerful speech. You are a leader. You inspire many youth. Yes, indeed, she does inspire many youth. Musori Bavirai and the young people speak up. Manyararire iko, and Manyararire iko. And Jack Muchairo, no to command patriotism. There she is. She is back. And we'll just continue from there. I think we have to now rush through so that this network doesn't get in the way. But before Namatai, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes. I just wanted you to respond to a question or a comment by Miranda here. She was talking about the question just disappeared, but she was talking about you being careful that you are now an enemy of the state. And I just wanted to ask you so that you respond very, very briefly before we go into the second part of this discussion, which is the Patriot Bill. Are you not afraid? Did you get my
hello,
question?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you get my question?
No, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I wanted you to respond to this comment by Miranda. She says, well done, girl. Just watch your back. You are now a threat to ZANU. So I wanted you to just very briefly respond here and just tell us, are you not scared? Are you not afraid?
Okay, so thank you so much, Miranda, for the question / comment. I think what I can just say is that we are here to do our best, particularly for our country, and that is true patriotism. We are not going to leave our country. We're not going to look the other way while things go wrong in our country. We have to continuously do our best, whether we speak out, whether we organize, make sure that things actually do get better. In the context of are you afraid? I would say absolutely, definitely. But that's where we need to have a conversation around courage. Maya Angelou once said that courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, it is impossible to practice any other virtue with consistency. So you can't be consistently kind if you don't have courage, because someone is going to come and you're kind to them, but they're not going to respond in a nice way, you know? So you have to have courage. You can't be consistently honest. You can't be consistently upright if you don't have courage. So people in Zimbabwe, particularly the younger generation, must have the kind of courage that emanates from the knowledge that we are dead anyway. We understand that if the system does not mess up our lives up, does not kill us, we will be killed by our healthcare system. We will be killed by our poor transport system. If you think of the number of preventable deaths on the road that are there every year, it's very, very saddening. But we will be killed by this thing or the other because we live in a country where virtually it's unsafe to be alive. It's virtually unsafe to exist. And while it's easy for us to look away and say, well, I would rather just ignore like everything that is happening and just focus on trying to live my best life and make the most of what's there. We have to understand that there is a generation that will come after us, of our children and their children. And if we did not do something to make it better, they will go through some of the horrible experiences we're currently experiencing. So definitely, yes. This is what's there. I'm a Zimbabwean. I stay in Zimbabwe. People say, oh, people like Namatai, they tweet from outside Zimbabwe. That's not true. I stay in Zimbabwe. I'm a Zimbabwean. We're not going anywhere. We love our country. So it's just a personal decision and a personal resolve. And I truly hope that more and more young people, locally here in Zimbabwe, and even young people in the diaspora, are able to organize around these issues, contribute one way or the other towards making our country better. Because at the end of the day, this is all we have. People don't want us in their countries. We have to just think of South Africa. They don't want us in their country. They don't want foreigners.
You're right about that. They don't want us here either. They don't want us in the United States either, or in the UK. They want us back in our country. But anyway, Namatai, let's dive into the last segment of our discussion. That is the Patriot Bill, and it affects everyone. It affects the people in the diaspora. It affects civil society. It affects even ZANU-PF people. It's a very, very bad bill. So please, let's go again. Educate us. Tell us about it. 8 minutes, 10 minutes. We can give you that. But let's talk about the Patriot Bill.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to try to be time conscious because I've seen that our time has really flown. So yes, the Patriot Bill is a very interesting one. And I want to just maybe first give a shout out to the work that has again been done by Kubatana, by Veritas, and people like Musa Kita and Yasin Nara, who have written splendidly with regards to the Patriot Bill. So people have to understand that the bill is not there yet, right? It has not been put in Parliament yet. But it has been debated in Parliament that there is a need for such a bill. So people have to understand that. So on the 2nd of March, 2021, the Minister of Justice cleared some of the urgent matters for the House, particularly for what the bill being the conversation being led by Honorable Togarepi. So he cleared some of the key agendas for them to introduce the need for a Patriot Bill up for debate in Parliament. And the lead voice in that was Honorable Togarepi. So basically just a history of how this Patriot Bill was to be proposed. So we understand that in the 2019 and the 2018 report by the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, they proposed and suggested that a Patriot Bill be enacted. That's what they proposed. So the origins of this particular Patriot Bill have to be the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission in their reports of 2018 and 2019. Then after they had proposed this, on the 4th of October 2020, an article was published in the Sunday Mail in which it was reported that the principles of the proposed Patriot Bill are aimed at criminalizing private correspondence with foreign governments to the detriment of national interest had been drafted. And this was soon to be tabled in Cabinet for consideration of legal enactment. So this is what happened. It was published in the Sunday Mail on the 4th of October 2020, which is last year. Then this was then quickly followed up by the Minister of Information, Monica Mutangwa, on the 4th. This was actually done after. It was a follow-up after the Minister of Information, Monica Mutangwa, on the 4th of August, in her reading of the 27th post-cabinet briefing, she had also stated that, we need such a bill. So we need to understand that this is the background story, right? That it was first the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission in their 2018 and 2019 reports who suggested that we need the bill, criminalize private correspondence with foreign governments, as well as people who decampaign the country. And I say decampaign in quotes. So those were the first people to propose it. It was followed through on the 4th of August 2020 by the Minister of Information, Monica Mutangwa, and on October the 4th, an article was published in the Sunday Mail report that the principles of this particular bill would be emanating from the context of criminalizing private correspondence with foreign governments. This is just the backstory of how this bill came to be. And it can be stated that this bill had been circulating in ZANU-PF circles for a very, very long time, before it was now made public through the statement by the minister as well as state press that then confirmed this. So like I said, we don't have an actual bill. People ask me, can we have a copy of the bill? Not being put in parliament, but it is looming and the conversation is already there and it is seriously being pursued, as it were. So this is what happened. So fast track to the 2nd of March 2021, we have Togarapi, Honorable Togarapi, who is also a ZANU-PF MP. It's important to state the party from which this bill is emanating, who then moved that motion in parliament, and it was debated, right? It was debated. So some of the key things that we now need to understand is, what basically is this patriot bill that they want to come up with? What are its principles? So we need to also understand that. And then we also need to understand the different kinds of criticism of the patriot bill. So basically, the patriot bill is basically a legal instrument that seeks to be enacted, basically bar or rather criminalize private correspondence with foreign governments, as well as to punish those who decampaign the country, right? So this is just basically a simple definition of the patriot bill. And basically, I've already talked about its origins. We understand that the principles of this bill are meant to come from legal precedents and quotes that has been set by the Logan Act, according to those who are forwarding this particular bill. And basically, the Logan Act is a piece of legislation in the United States which came into effect in 1799, which is more than 220 years ago. And basically, this particular piece of legislation was enacted after a politician by the name of George Logan went to negotiate peace between America and France during the undeclared naval war, I think of the 1798 to 1800 period. So what basically happened with this guy called Logan is that he misrepresented and basically humiliated the United States of America, particularly President John Adams, in his mission by basically stating that he wasn't sent by them and driving some other agenda. So because he had humiliated, and I say this in quotes, he had humiliated the Federalists, whom at the time had control of the House of Congress, they decided to enact a Logan Act to punish perceived political adversaries who attempted to get involved in international politics on behalf of the state. So this is where the principles are being derived. Now, when we look at the Logan Act, we need to understand that this particular piece of legislation, in its 220 years of existence, has never been once used to prosecute anyone, ever. So basically, it's just literally a redundant piece of legislation that has never actually been used to prosecute anyone in the United States. It has only been brought up and pursued on 2 accounts, but on both accounts, it has never been used to actually lead to an actual prosecution of any particular individual. So this is the Save Logan Act that is being used by those who are forwarding the Patriot Bill to say, well, listen, if in America they have the Logan Act, then here in Zimbabwe, we are supposed to have a Patriot Bill. So Now we want to dig deeper into some of the conversations that have been held and why people have been strongly advocating against the patriotic bill. So the first reason around why people have been resistant is the conversation around how you cannot legislate patriotism. You just can't. You can't legislate patriotism. Then the second issue that has been brought about is the conversation around how this particular view on patriotism is littered with, political toxicity. Because if it was really a conversation around patriotism, a national process to establish the definition of a national version of patriotism would have been embarked on. But we understand that this particular proposal of a patriotic bill is emanating from one hostile political camp and is being directed towards another political camp, and basically the reasons are pretty much partisan, right? So some of the things that were stated by Honorable Garapi, if you read the Hansard that was produced by Parliament from the 2nd of March, is that he said that those who decampaign the country, and the definition of decampaigning is extremely broad, because I could just read hashtag Zimbabwe Lives Matter, and because it's seen by a lot of people outside the country, including foreign governments, it could be seen to be decampaigning. But basically, you are basically saying, can we please respect human rights? So the conversation around respecting human rights could quickly turn into a conversation around you are decampaigning the country. We also need to factor in that this particular bill was proposed by the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission in its 2018 and 2019 reports. And this is the same commission that is supposed to deal with such issues around the Gukura Hundi, etc. So it's in their best interest that they thaw people's ability to be able to engage with the international community so that they are not facing as much pressure in the context of accountability being demanded about the 20,000 deaths or so that occurred in Macmillan more than 30 years ago. That having been said, we also need to understand that the patriotic bill in itself also seeks to be used to ensure that political opponents that have supposedly decampaigned the country by asking for sanctions to be imposed do not run for office. So it's also meant to bar certain individuals from being eligible to run for office. And this is in the words of Honorable Garapi. So some citizens of this country have then been asking, why aren't we having a situation where maybe participants in the Gukura Hundi, for instance, where they slaughtered countrymen, fellow countrymen and countrywomen, why aren't they being barred from public office by patriotic bill? So it's literally left a huge debate around patriotism, with mostly people indicating, generally the public sentiment, is that patriotism is not what is being proposed in the patriotic bill, but rather it is hinged around creating a safe, secure, and well-governed society that makes it easy for each and every Zimbabwean to live and to actualize their fullest potential and capabilities, as well as their dreams. Another issue that we also need to understand with regards to the backlash on the patriotic bill is on the conversation, besides the conversation that it has political motivations, which is absolutely true. Basically, it's meant to penalize political speech. So you will be punished for having political speech. It's just basically a muzzle. We also need to understand that this patriotic bill is a move towards creating a one-party state. It is a move that is meant to legislate certain measures into place that bar the flourishing of a vibrant and healthy opposition. That's basically it. And this will just basically be creating a one-party state, because basically anyone who dares to voice a contrary opinion to what is the dominant narrative will be deemed as some kind of terrorist, and they will be basically muzzled and prosecuted. So these were some of the outcries that I hinged on the Patriot Bill, to say that it is going to violate our constitutional rights to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, packaged in what is. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You're back.
Thank you. So all of this is being packaged in what is being called a patriotism, but it has absolutely nothing to do with patriotism. But basically, it is hinged on settling old political scores with political competition and political enemies. So it has absolutely nothing to do with patriotism. So those were some of the outcries with regards to the patriotic bill that has been proposed. I think I've talked about its origins, I've talked about its principles, and I've also talked about its particular detriments and particularly the concerns that have been raised by citizens with regards to the forwarding and the proposal of this patriotic bill. So I think if people want more information with regards to some of the debates that have already been heard, NISA, Veritas, Kubatana, and also the Parliament Hansard from the 2nd of March 2021 are great sources for you to read for yourself. Some of what has already been said and has already been written, and also the legal interpretations that have been produced by different groups, organizations, and lawyers with regard to the patriotic bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Namatai. Before we play another video, the last one that we're going to play, that will obviously fit into your closing remarks. Let me read a few questions here. From Tanaka Mdavanu, great endeavor, Namatai. How can diasporan youth engage and help with the democratic process in Zimbabwe? I'm sure you can cover that in your closing remarks. But right now, if you can quickly, very briefly answer this question. I'm here, I'm an American citizen, and I'm talking to you right now. Are you a criminal under the Patriot Bill? Because I'm a foreigner if I'm an American citizen, right? So if we are having a discussion or a conversation that we are having right now, do you think that can be criminalized?
Sorry, can you please come again with the question?
I was saying the Patriot Bill, it targets Zimbabweans for corresponding or having a discussion or talking about Zimbabwe with a foreign entity or a foreign individual. I am an American citizen. I'm having a discussion with you. Are you a criminal?
I think in a very overt sense, that is what this particular bill seeks to imply, that if you are seen to be corresponding with foreign entities, particularly in a way that decampaigns the country. So let's say I engage with you that, oh, here we are being beaten up or bad things happening, and they manage to finally catch up with that. They say that, you know, that conversation was held with a foreign entity. Definitely, it could be premise upon which you are criminalized and actually prosecuted. Another issue that Honorable Garati said is that even if I badmouth the president, because he said that no foreign government would take seriously or want to work with someone who is called a lot of names and whom a lot of bad things are said. So if I am to then express negativity or to say something that is negative about the president, and particularly with foreign governments and foreign entities, that could be taken to be decampaigning. And maybe depending on the magnitude, and also if you are found out that such has happened, it would be possible to actually be criminalized. So I think in a very basic sense, yes, there would be premise upon which you could be criminalized under this patriotic act if it becomes an act. So I think if we wait and see what will be the contents of the act, then we will be clear on how people would be criminalized. But I don't believe that we should wait and see until it is an act or a law. We should actually do something about it now to make sure that the bill never sees the light of day.
Thank you very much. Let's play this last video and see, and then we'll talk about the last section where we want solutions, we want ideas, we want what we can do as Zimbabweans to stop the Patriot Bill. Let's play the video. Fraser Mzondo.
As a young leader, I've had the experience of meeting a lot of young people that are bystanders. They like to look at things from the outside, but they don't necessarily show up. And this is a problem because basically there is a common expression that says the world is run by idiots who show up. So if you didn't show up, then you shouldn't complain. You see, one of the worst things that has happened to us as young people is we like to complain a lot. But when things are happening, we actually don't show up. We consistently don't show up for public meetings, and we give excuses like, oh, we were busy doing something. We consistently don't show up in places where decisions are being made. We consistently don't show up for elections or show up to run for office. Of course, there are a lot of reasons that might be affecting us, but in the given pretext of things, we have absolutely no excuse because the world is simply run by those who show up. So basically, by you not showing up, by you deciding not to do something, in a way you've actually done something, and that something disempowers you. We must be in a position to always be looking for where the big talk is happening, for where the big decisions are being made, and we show up in those places. Now, to make it very, very clear, as a young leader, I've also learned that sometimes showing up is about having the courage to step in, even in places where you're not wanted. It's not in every space where decisions are being made and there are a lot of power dynamics that young people will be invited. In most cases, you will not be invited. In most cases, you will get on the decision-making table and they have chairs for everyone else except you. But the most important thing is to let yourself know that in the given pretext and context of things, you've got to show up. If they don't have a chair for you, show up with a stool and find yourself a place to sit and have something to say and contribute. Because at the end of the day, we have the most to lose from not showing up. You see, I'll give you an example. If you do not show up to vote on election day, those who show up will make the decision for you. By you deciding not to do something in a way you've actually already done it. If you do not show up to participate in public hearings and public meetings, it is only the ideas of those who showed up on the day but will be documented. By you not showing up, basically your voice is not heard and you're basically non-existent. You see, by not showing up, we give leeway for those who show up to make decisions on our behalf. We give them the power to decide what our lives are becoming tomorrow. We give them the power to decide everything about who we are and what we are becoming as a nation and as a continent, simply because we're not showing up for things. So basically, I do not care whatever excuse you have not to show up, but we have to change that attitude and that culture. We have to be the generation of young people that shows up for each and everything where decisions are being made that are affecting our lives and our future. So what's your excuse? Why don't you show up? Let me know in the comments below. As a young leader,
What's your excuse? Tell us if we are going to stop the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2, if we are going to stop the Patriot Bill, if we are going to stop the rot that is going on in our country, the corruption, the looting, and everything, the arbitrary arrests that are going on, we have to show up. Namatai, I know you're concerned about people not showing up. Now you have to round up and tell us about solutions, about the actionables, what we can do to stop the Patriot Bill being passed and the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 being passed. Are people going to show up? Are diasporans going to show up? The diaspora youth that our comrade here is talking about, are they going to show up? Youth in Zimbabwe, everyone in Zimbabwe, are we going to show up? But tell us, what can we do as we finish?
Okay, thank you so much, Chief. I think to start with, what's very important is for people to understand the bills and to know that they exist. So basically, number one is public awareness. Meetings such as this one are very important, and you can have them without myself. You can have them with any legal consultant that you have access to. Reach out to Zimbabwe, reach out to Veritas. They have excellent lawyers. They've been doing excellent work around these particular bills and engage them so that they actually come and they raise public awareness and they share with you what are these bills. They explain to you, they break them down in layman's language and everyone actually understands. And the great thing about having lawyers is that there is also a legal interpretation and also a political interpretation. So we understand what are the implications of this bill with regards to our laws as well as our democracy. Then after that, it is important for people to begin to engage the Portfolio Committee on Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, engage the Ministry and the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, and also engage Parliament. Ways of engagement include such things as write letters, and this has to be well coordinated. So you write letters in their thousands, and you document that. You share on social media how much you have submitted at Parliament for accountability purposes, sharing your opinions on some of the feelings you have and the thoughts you have towards some of these things. Another issue is on petitions. We need to have a significant number of people, and I'm talking people in their 50s of thousands, hundreds of thousands, signing petitions that we send to Parliament to express our discontentment and to express our disapproval of both the bills that are actually happening. The petitions are instrumental to show that the bulk of the people in this country are not okay with what is actually happening. And that is very instrumental, even if there are legal arguments that also have to be put across to say, like, if you are saying that the MPs are representing people, but hundreds of thousands of people have indicated displeasure, then who are you representing? Other issues that they are engaging members of parliament. At the moment, it's very unfortunate that because this has been a problem for us, that because of the recalls that have happened,
There we go again with the network. Oh my goodness. Let's go to the people's comments. I'm not seeing any questions as yet, but I'm seeing a lot of very positive comments there. Patriotism is not supposed to be legislated. Florence Chifambi, thank you for that clarification. Namatai, Fraser Mzondo, ZANU-PF basically wants to pocket our freedom. Yes, that's exactly what they are doing. Patriot Bill will be used to harass the opposition, just like they are doing with COVID-19. We call it weaponizing COVID-19. They are also going to weaponize the Patriot Bill. Let me see here if Namatai is back. Not yet. But that's what is happening. The government is trying to weaponize these bills, the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2, as well as the Patriot Bill. And we are saying no to that, no to all those bills. But for us to be able to do that, for us to be successful in stopping these bills, like Namatai was saying in that other powerful speech, we have to show up. When we say, let's act, when we say, let's write a petition, that petition has to be signed. We have had a problem that we write petitions and they're not signed. Right now, we are having the government. They are sitting in the parliament right now. The parliament is discussing the Patriot Bill. What have you done? Not the people in Zimbabwe, not Chief Shoshe, not anyone. What have you done yourself? Because anyone here, any one of us here can sit down and write a letter to parliament. And whether it's considered or not, but imagine the impact of 200 people, 2,000 people, maybe 200,000 people, maybe 2 million people writing letters to parliament. Kana achinozara matsamba acho, ozara matsamba acho ikoko. But they would have seen that people do not want the Patriot Bill. So we cannot be worried about the Patriot Bill and then we don't do anything about it. And then we don't show up. Let's get worried about the Patriot Bill and do something about it. Write letters. Remember what we said the other time. The reason why maybe the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 is delayed being passed is because of those women who wrote letters to Parliament. And what Namatai and the other young people have been doing. Namatai is back. The network is playing hide and seek with us. But thank you so much that you are back. You can continue. Yes, you can unmute and then continue. Yeah, you're still muted, Namatai. If you can just unmute. Yes, there you go. Now you can go ahead. You can go ahead, Namatai. It looks like she's still having issues with her network, and we were about to get finished, but we're going to allow her time to come and give us her closing remarks because she has given such a good presentation, such a powerful presentation. She has to round it up. Let's pray that this network allows her to come back. But just in our discussion here, we are saying, guys, let's do something about it. Let's not talk about this and it ends here on the show. Let's actually do something. Let's have the people in the United Kingdom sitting down and writing letters and writing petitions. Those in America doing the same thing. Those in Australia doing the same thing. Those in Zimbabwe doing the same thing. We have to do something. Not doing something cannot be an option. Because if you don't show up, like what Namatai was saying, if you don't show up, those few people that are in parliament are going to pass this law that will determine your life, I don't know, in the next how many years until we take back our country. So we have to do something ourselves. We cannot just discuss and then it ends there. Let me put back Namatai. I can see she is back, but I have to add her to the stream. There she is. Let's hope she'll be able to hear us now. Namatai, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I think you can just take away, finish up what you're saying, and give us your closing remarks, because this network may prevent you from closing up this powerful and very educative presentation that you gave us.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, so like I'd indicated, let me just break it down to simple points I want to be explaining. Number one, I had said that you need to raise public awareness of what is happening. You can do this through having dialogues, through having community outreaches. Some of those dialogues can be physical, in-person dialogues. Some of those dialogues can be online dialogues, organizing yourselves wherever you are to ensure that everyone has enough awareness about what is happening and what exactly the Patriotic Bill and the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 mean. Then for interpretation, be it legal, political interpretation, best you engage lawyers who also help you to interpret so that people actually understand what are the implications of these bills on citizens. The next issue would be on engagement, writing letters. That's very important. Doing petitions, particularly if we can have hundreds of thousands of people signing these petitions. These petitions can be done online. They can also be physically done depending on what is logistically possible, and to ensure that they are delivered to Parliament, the Ministry of Justice, and the Portfolio Committee on Justice, as well as the Minister of Justice. Additionally, what can be done after the letters and the petitions is to make use of online social media campaigns. It's very, very important for us to utilize social media. Whenever meeting, develop the consistently used hashtags and to use them consistently so that everyone is in the loop and we can tell how many other people are doing this at a particular time, even though there is no centralization in the context of who is coordinating everything. Another important thing that we can do is to organize peaceful protest, organize peaceful demonstrations about the bills after we have attempted to engage. This can be done by people in the diaspora, maybe go to the Zimbabwean embassy. We can even have online protest even, whereby maybe people hold placards online and they speak something about the message that is being done, about the processes that are being done with regards to the constitutional amendment bill and the patriotic bill. Another thing that can be done is to invite the Minister of Justice, portfolio committee members, as well as the members of parliament who are advancing some of these bills for public debates, for public engagements, to hear what they have to say, and so that they explain themselves, engage them. Another thing that Simbachi Kwekweza had said before he left was engagement with the media. It's important to ensure that journalists also understand, because they will have to write about some of these things, and be sympathetic to some of what is being done in this. They also advance that. So these are some of the things that citizens can do. Engaging members of parliament. At this point, citizens will be forced to engage ZANU-PF or ZANU-PF light, I would say, members of parliament, because of the recalls. We don't really have. So you engaging them, and just sharing what you think and what you feel is also very important. Whether they listen or not is another issue, but we should actually attempt to engage them, because some of those people, they actually don't know what they're doing. They're going to cast a vote on and say yes to something that's not going to just ruin this country in the context of its democratic discourse, but it's going to make it a nightmare for development to happen, because they're going to be actively participating in the creation of a one-party state. And we cannot be having a one-party state, in a modern situation like we find ourselves in as Zimbabwe. So I think we need to also raise those issues with them, so that they know it's very unlikely that they're going to support this because of the whipping system. So even if what you're saying makes sense to them, they're probably not going to vote for it, to vote against it come voting day. But it's important that we also engage them and they know. So these are some of the things that people can actually do. Form coalitions, reach out to each other, both Zimbabweans locally, Zimbabweans and the diaspora, reach out to each other as different groups, civil society, political players, and also speak with one voice. I think that's very, very important, to have a consistent message with regards to what we want the outcomes of some of these campaigns to be. The final thing I want to say is that we should not place the burden to resist these things on specific individuals or institutions or activists. We can organize ourselves from wherever you are. You don't need an Namatai. You don't need a younger Son Matete or a Prince Gora or a Bongai Zemudzi for you to pursue these issues. You need to be having interest, and then you engage the right legal people, the right technical people. You organize from wherever you are in the world. You organize from wherever you are in Zimbabwe, whatever institution you are. This is how movements are formulated. If you're a journalist, you don't need some of these activists that have been running up and about. You can just write an article about this to also raise public awareness, and that will be your contribution to the process, because at the end of the day, we want to build a strong and healthy movement, and we want to make sure that the voice is loud and clear. So I think that's my response to that. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Namatai. I think there was a question that was asked about what the youth in the diaspora and the youth in Zimbabwe, what can they do? Can they collaborate and come up with something and do something?
Okay, that's a very good question. So I think definitely opportunities for collaborations are very much necessary and welcome for organization. Like I had said, for every activity that I mentioned on what people can do, whether writing the petitions, etc., people can participate and they can collaborate on those aspects to make sure that we reach huge numbers, and to also make sure that we make use of the available resources that are unique to our context. So for instance, youth in the diaspora might have more liberty to share certain things on social media, to be more free to speak out than youth in Zimbabwe. So you can take advantage of that, because you've got freedom to do that. So definitely areas of collaboration are there. I think it's just now a question of reaching out and seeing how best we can help each other given our different contexts.
Well, thank you very much, Namatai. I think we have all heard if you still have questions on the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2 and the Patriot Bill, she told us about the resources that we can utilize, that we can make use of. And I think she's also a very good resource herself. If you're not following her on Twitter, please start following her on Twitter, because she gives out, she churns out a lot of information every day. I don't even know where you get the time, because every time when I'm on my phone, I'm just seeing tweets coming in about the Patriot Bill, about the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. I don't know where you get the time, but that's what she was telling us here, that let us all get involved. Otherwise, we are going to find out that we cannot have a part in choosing the judges that we have, or the vice presidents, that will just become a prerogative of one person. And on the Patriot Bill, it's a pity, because that bill affects you and me. You know, one day you go to Zimbabwe, you get arrested at the Harare International Airport because you engage someone not in a political narrative or political situation. Maybe it was church, maybe it was just a business, but the government can just use that against you. So we cannot allow our freedom of speech, our freedom of association, and our freedom of expression to be infringed on like that, when we can do something, when we can just simply show up and come and do all these ideas that Namatai talked about: online protests, physical demonstrations where you can do it, social media activism, writing letters. That's the simplest thing that we can all do, as external assemblies, as diasporans, as Zimbabweans in general, and as Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe. We can simply just write a letter or write letters. That will have an impact. At least we are not keeping quiet, because keeping quiet is not an option. Namatai, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. Please keep up the good work that you're doing. We are behind you. But like you said, we cannot be counting on you alone. We all have to show up. Thank you. And to our viewers and listeners across the world, we thank you for being here. Let's go and start acting on the 2 bills. Thank you.